Thanks for tuning in to Murder Murder News, your true crime news source for missing persons, breaking cases, survivor stories, and cold cases. Plus recommendations for the newest TV shows and podcasts. Maybe you've always secretly wanted to join a cult and really are drawn to the idea of making flower crowns, running around with baby goats, and trying to break down the systems that allow for human trafficking. But you're worried that joining a cult might mean a whole lot of murder and brainwashing. Well, this just might be the cult for you. I'm Aurora.
And I'm Angelina. Cults are no fun alone, so don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and tell all of your true crime friends to join the commune at patreon.com/murdermurdernews. This is the Week in True Crime. We have a special episode today. We are joined by Victoria Roland, who is the host of the podcast Unseen, the Trafficked Truth. The podcast supports and promotes survivors of human trafficking in their own journeys. They provide a space for survivors to be heard, but also want to launch them into their futures.
Victoria is so fantastic at helping facilitate these stories because she's not only an amazing human and a great host, but she's also a survivor of sex trafficking and exploitation herself. She has shared her own story on her show, and she's here to share it with us today. Let's welcome Victoria Roland to the show. So Victoria, thank you so much for joining us today. We could not be more excited to have you here.
Thank you. I am too excited, way too excited. People got to hold me down out here. Fellow beautiful Canadians.
Yes. Well, we're going to kind of jump straight into the deep end today, so I hope that's okay. So we want to start with your story. Can you tell us what happened leading up to the day you were trafficked?
Yes. Well, first and foremost, thank you. I'm probably going to say that so many times. Genuinely, because you guys are making my story matter. Oh. And I survived in my own way that I felt should be silenced and not heard for just so long. And I felt a lot of guilt and shame in that because I was trafficked, but I was able to get away. And it was from a peer that I went to college with, and he essentially was a recruiter. Wow. So all of that is barely touched on, is the fact that there is peer recruitment heavy in sex trafficking. So there's the pimp, there's the trafficker, there's everyone knows of the buyers, there's the folks that are labeled as the prostitutes or the sex workers or the streetwalkers, the sugar babies, all of these different entities, but we're really never talking about the recruiter. So I had graduated college at age 23, 24, and I relocated to Miami. I'm from the first state of Delaware, which is small as heck. And I'm like, I gotta go venture off to the real life. And this recruiter was a college peer and someone that I dated on and off in college. So that's what makes it worse, right? Yeah. He didn't have to groom me, all of the entities where we talk about traffickers groom them and all of these things. We were dating. And one of the points of recruiters or people that know you is that they know you, right? So here we are talking about sex trafficking, and I'm super vulnerable, but I want to say he knew everything. I mean, we had sex, period. You know what I mean? Right. So when I relocated to Miami, it was 2005-ish, and MySpace just came out. So this social media now gives me hella anxiety. But I do want to say that when I was in Miami looking for work, I started into reality casting. So essentially, I was a recruiter for talent. And a reality show was taken off. They give me a character or a person that they want on the screen that I go look for. And I'm really, really good at outreach. So I'm like boots on the ground type of chick. I can go into clubs, bars, like happy hour scenes, and just approach people and meet people. I mean, my first casting gig was for Bad Girls Club. And I was looking for baddies.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but That is one of my all-time favorite TV shows.
No, Aurora. Can I tell you, I was actually casted for it, but I wasn't. I know. I was just like,
That's amazing.
what do you see here? And I'm actually not bad enough, but
oh my God, I love it.
it was a fabulous casting director. She was a beautiful Black woman from New York. And she was like, but Victoria, like, you can just go talk to people. She was like, can you work for me? And we'll help find these baddies. But then she told me, she spoke of me to other casting directors when they would come to Miami. So I was getting shows like The Bachelorette, The Bachelor, and they were looking for like, sexy Latin men. And I'm just like, I can do this. I can,
that's fun.
Right.
So along with that, I'm like posting my gigs on MySpace, right? Because that's what recruiters do. They have on-air postings. Well, he hits me up and essentially is like, Victoria, you're doing such a great job. We're looking for boxing ring girls. And boxing was really heavy in Philly at the time. And I said, oh, that's too easy. I'm already working on Miami Beach Swim Week. I know how to get girls. And like, it's just a 2-piece and they're carrying a number sign. That's so easy. I'll tell you what I need, location, how many hours I want to catch a red eye, how much per day, whatever. Sounded legit. And fast forward, I get to Philly and he's nowhere to be found, not answering the phone. It seemed a little off, but also I'm on the professional end of it, right? I'm like, well, he did his part. He doesn't have to be around, but at least you could do is just call me and say, okay, everything's already set up. Well, I get in the taxi cab and he finally texts me. And mind you, this is 2005, so we legit don't have the advancements of technology.
Not smartphones, really. Yeah.
Right.
I probably was like a remote looking phone at that point.
Yeah, like a Nokia.
Couldn't do much. So the text messages were essentially short as shit. So I'm just like, he's like, don't worry, I'll be at the hotel. Just go to this location. And it's in the evening time, probably late summer, and I'm thinking nothing of it. But I asked the taxi cab driver, I'm like, hey, I don't know where I'm going, but here it is because I don't know how much this is going to cost. And he's like, oh, it's not too far away. I remember being like 20 minutes. And that's when it really hit me when we pulled up into the hotel and there were 3 African-American guys coming out, which could have been the boxers and their security, or it just could have been another coordinator, I don't know, maybe somebody else affiliated with the boxers who wanted to specifically see what type of girls that we actually cast for. They grab my bags, pay the taxi cab. I walk in and the front desk clerk, who was also female, was just like having my card out. She didn't ask me my name. She didn't ask me anything. And it makes me really, obviously it makes me look back and say like hotels are definitely being sued right now because it was right underneath their noses. Some knew and some didn't. But I mean, when you're speaking of minors, I mean, you got to know at some point.
Right.
And I remember specifically looking to my left and there were other men with females. So I'm just thinking this, everybody's staying here. The entourage, possibly groupies. I didn't care. I mean, I lived in Miami. There were groupies everywhere. Everybody was going out. I'm thinking we're going to go out. But they followed me as they directed me to the hotel room and they had a key card because I was only given one. So I was like, okay, maybe this is just not the venue. We're going to go to the venue where the casting room is. They're following me and I could just feel all eyes on me and I could feel and hear one say, oh yeah, damn, she is fine. So setup, absolute setup. He told them about me, not about my job. Click off, radar on. But what scared me is when I walked into the room and there were 2 streetwalkers at the time. I didn't really know if they were prostitutes. But they were in the room in like very old style, either club dresses or homecoming dresses. I don't know. They just were not fit for the trends that were obviously, I'm coming from Miami, right? So I'm just like, well, I know club scenes don't look like that. And I remember specifically one was very thin, African-American, and the other one was Asian, chubby. All 3 men came in still had my bags, closed the door. The one man who was obviously the trafficker, he said, well, you're going to learn tonight, and we're leaving for Vegas in the morning. And that was it. And I talk about it because I look back and I say, I talk about it in a sense where I'm now learning the fawn response, because I did not freeze in a point where it was like, what? You know, I didn't say anything. I just stared at them. It's like I immediately jumped into, I want to do whatever it is to survive.
Yeah.
And whatever is going to happen, I thought he was going to rape me. I just thought the guys were going to stay and come back, take their turns. I didn't know why the females were in there. Either they were going to show me through the dates coming in and out of the room. And it was just things in my mind, but it was never fight, and it was never leave. It was never flight.
Right.
And I just kicked into action, and I was like, okay, well, if I have to learn what I need to learn tonight, I'm going to make sure it's not involving drugs, because I wasn't doing drugs at the time. And I wanted to make sure I did not have to pull a date. I knew that at the very least, because I didn't want to have sex with any person. And those ladies were so like just out of their bodies. It was just like, do you know what is happening right now? And it just seemed too natural. And that made my work into the humanizing part of it, because I see that side. I see the work that needs to go into the women who are labeled as prostitutes. I see my work into recruiters. I see my work into the traffickers, because they are humans too. Whatever happened to them. But at that moment, it clicked that I couldn't just like just degrade them either. I couldn't guilt or shame them either, because I probably was about to turn into one of those.
Right.
And when I say one of those, what we see and what a lot of people see are literally streetwalkers or prostitutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm flashbacking in my mind of everything, like what I left in Miami, my college degree. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to be in the streets of Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wasn't even going to be a stripper. I was going to be a prostitute on the streets. I was going to be a streetwalker. It was never an option. Like the life was not even an option for me that time that they closed the door. So from that point on, I had to figure out how I was going to escape and get away.
So what was your process like after after being trafficked, like when you were coming to terms with just how bad things could have been?
Sorry, Angelina, can we actually go back to how you got away and visit that too? I'm sorry, I realized we phrased that question. When I wrote these, I was a little out of it. That question a little bit weird, but I do want to talk about the whole story. And I've heard this before, Angelina, this might be the first time for you, but you were amazing how you did it. So can we talk a bit about how you were able to get out of this situation?
Yes, I definitely want to talk about how I got out, because it plays into part of my journey. And though I kept a lot of it silent. So we did leave the hotel room after the girls took a hit of whatever drugs. And that was one of the things that I learned, is that a lot of them were not just only forced into prostitution, that they were forced into the drugs, or maybe that it numbed them, or maybe it just, like hyped them up to be able to just get through what they had to get through.
Mm-hmm.
We did have to walk the streets. The ladies told me during the time that we walked the streets of Philly that they had a girl recruited. He recruited another girl from college. I don't know that she was from college, but it's most likely, because he wasn't, it sounded like his game was not up to par. Right. And when we were walking, I just made them have such a great relationship with me. And I really learned what they wanted. And I befriended them. I made a sisterhood for them. And I didn't have to turn the trick, which was have a date. I told them I knew everything. I knew the recruiter. We had relationships. I don't need to know how to do a date right now. Just tell me everything. Call your daddy right now. Excuse me. I had to preface him as my daddy too. Call daddy right now and let him know I'm all ready for Vegas. I will take all the tricks when we get to Vegas so that you all can rest, because it sounds like a lot. And what happened with the peer that he recruited, the female, they took her to New Jersey at the boardwalk in all of the casinos there. She did turn a trick, but that trick actually helped her get away. After the date, I think they said that she got out of the car or got out of the situation and was able to flee and get on a bus. They made sure that I did not have that option. But what happened when we went back to the room is they were so tired. They were so tired. And they also entrusted me into believing that I was just going to save them from tomorrow's antics of having to make whatever quota it was that they had to make. So they fell the hell to sleep. And I could not believe it. And they left my bag. By the grace of God or the universe, my ancestors, I say it all the time. My bag was there and my cell phone was in there. And I only knew one number. One number. So when we think about this in the true crime sense, I'm checking all the blocks that I'm just like, hell yeah. I knew a number. And I knew a number of a friend of mine who we also dated in college. And I knew he lived within the vicinity.
Wow.
What are the chances?
Right.
Right. And when we
Right.
did an interview with him, he literally was like, I didn't ask any questions, Victoria. I didn't ask any questions because you sounded like you were in distress. And I told him I only had 15 minutes because I knew that these men were somewhere around. And I also knew that if you didn't just come here, not even like make a scene, then I would be able to get out, right? I only had a split second. And he said, I think I know where you are. I described when we were walking the streets what was in the vicinity. And he said, I think I know where you are. And I just played it on faith. And I called. I had the thing that really got me is that when I opened the door, it really was an aha freaking moment. Like literally opened the door and he was in the car waiting and he's like looking as shocked as I was. And I'm literally running down the steps of the exit when I go through the door and I see him. He's like, what is happening? Because I'm like out of breath. But then we hear people. We hear grown men calling out to me and we see a man at the door and I'm just like, scurry off, like, let's get the hell out of here. And he never knew my story.
Wow.
He never asked.
Huh.
15 years later on the podcast, I asked him to listen to my story. That's how nervous I was.
Wow. He must have had an inkling because that's, had to be why he didn't ask. He just knew how serious it was.
And, when I returned to Miami, silence this whole experience. I act like it just never happened.
Right.
I blocked, deleted, tried to get off of like social media, but I also had my casting job and I really enjoyed that. So I worked heavy, but also I just wanted to learn about what the hell was that. And I did not know at the time that it was trafficking. I just thought it was a pimp and hoe game.
Right.
Because I mean, that's what we knew growing up. I mean, 70s, 80s, there's pimps and hoes everywhere, and I know that when I hear the term and when I learned about the term trafficking, it does make it more of a less shameful, more of a, I can associate with this, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that was my biggest thing is like when I started working, again, I don't know how I got this job working in research, but it segued into my work in casting. Because I was from Delaware, there was a posting for a recruiter to look for research subjects, and it was from the University of Delaware, but they had a satellite office in Miami. And I said, you know what, God, this is my position. This is I have it. And the project that they wanted me to work on was with streetwalkers and sex workers, right on and off Biscayne, really trying to get stories, and stories equate data. And that's how my journey of learning and receiving stories was my place at the time. Wow. I didn't know anything else, right? I didn't know how to be an advocate. I didn't know how to be really what an ally really is. I just knew that I was here to receive stories and give space and listen. And I can build a relationship with someone to tell me their whole life in like 5 minutes. I mean, that's how I was as a casting associate. And then that's how I was, with these two ladies in the hotel room. They told me their entire life and trusted me in a matter of time.
Wow.
Right. And do you have any sense of what happened to those women?
Absolutely not. I mean, when I tell you, I actually threw that phone away.
Right.
I threw that phone away as soon as I got to Miami. And mind you, my aunt and uncle were in law enforcement. My uncle was Miami PD, worked with SWAT, and my aunt was in correctional internal affairs. And I was scared to death to tell them what happened. Again, because I didn't know what it was. I just thought I was going to be pimped out. And I was scared to tell my story because I was just so grateful. Because I actually never made it back to Vegas. I never went to Vegas because I was so anxious about it. And when I made it in 2014, it was a most horrible time.
Wow.
I mean, it was like, you're being trafficked. You're being trafficked. Why is your knee
Right.
so bad? Why are your ankles so ashy? Who is that man? Why are you standing there? Are you waiting for a friend? Looks like you have a
Right.
date. It was just
Yeah.
horrible,
Mm-hmm.
horrible. And I retreated back to that day, and I thought that I put myself in their shoes. I really did, and I really could not deal. Like I really could not
Wow.
deal. So then I made it a mission even more that I want to work now. I'm okay to be an advocate. I'm okay to be an ally. I'm okay to be in these spaces now. And it was a 15-year journey to be able
Wow.
to say that.
Wow. So let's step back to your process. What was your process like after being trafficked and sort of coming to terms with how bad things could have been?
Yeah, I think what's important is that I was alongside these very, very struggling women. But also in that realm of work that I did, I still was doing castings, and I still was connected to that. It was almost like a challenge in my life. I worked on one research project where I was in strip clubs,
Wow.
and I was making relationships with these women. Like I literally was in a bathroom one time and they were sniffing coke, and I'm just like, by the way, I'm doing this research project that I really want to know how you got into this. It's a really, it's a genuine, real question, right? Coming from someone that I'm not, I'm offering you $25 too, by the way. It's probably nothing, but you can probably skip this lap dance if you want, and get some information.
Mm-hmm.
9 out of 10, they were forced into it.
Oh,
9 out of
man.
10
Wow.
had a manager,
Wow.
pimp, trafficker.
That's incredible.
9 out of 10, they were not keeping all of their money.
Wow.
And I continue to just deviate into, I cannot process that this would have been me.
Yeah.
I cannot. So I just dug deeper into the work. So every opportunity it was for me to put my head into the books, to listen to stories, to watch movies, to just be amongst these people helped me in my recovery, in my journey. And it was actually keeping my story silent, which, you know, I learned now from all of the survivors that you can't just trauma puke on people. That's their term. You can't just trauma
Yeah,
puke on people, because then
that's
it's
true.
like, who's cleaning up your mess? It's
Right.
all over you again, all over you. The
Right.
smell to where it was happening. And sometimes even the reporters that they tell me, or people that talk to them, because I'm still in this, like, it's a freaking crime. Like sex
Yeah,
trafficking is a crime, right?
of
It's
course.
not, right? So you're going to have journalists, you're going to have investigators, right? But the common theme that they tell me is like, can you bring me back to that room? And that can set them back 1,000 times. So
Yeah.
I just learned early on to not be that person.
Wow.
To
To
just find,
re-traumatize people.
right, I don't want to re-traumatize people, because
Right.
I constantly had a barrier up so much that I knew how far I can go. Like
Yeah.
what's my limit, right? What's my boundary? And that takes time. And I learned that with the work that I did. I was just kind of like that person for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in a nutshell, it was really learning and educating myself. That changed my life. I
Wow.
really did.
Fantastic. And you've already touched on this a little bit about your process of discovery, but at what point did you realize just how big of an epidemic trafficking was? And did you know at this time, it sounds like not, that the term existed and that it was actually what happened to you?
I did not. I did not know how bad trafficking was rampant in the US. Like many others, I believed it was an international crime,
Right.
or it was happening where they were kidnapping and wanting American women, blonde hair, blue eyes, for the highest rate possible for whatever usage in international, affairs. And that ain't it.
Yeah.
It was, you know what I mean? That was not it. And it didn't take, I didn't realize this until 2009 when I relocated back to Delaware. I was going to work on another project with the University of Delaware. But I realized I wanted to do something in residential. And here's the reason why. Every time I did those interviews for my research study, or every time I would see and interview a streetwalker, they had no place to go to. Were constantly buying their own hotel rooms. The strippers constantly staying with their friends because they're going to bounce from city to city,
Yeah.
strip club to strip club. And it was just no stable placement. And at this time, I do want to say I had not been in contact with minors being trafficked. I was still working with adults. So I put those two together and I said, I remember hearing so many stories where some of the women were in the life early as a teenager because they were in foster care, didn't have a place to go to, or there was something going on where their mom was a prostitute or a sex worker, right? So my first job was a residential boys group home. And that was my first disclosure from a minor that he was pimped out by his mom since the age of 4 for crack cocaine.
Wow.
And then I did my research, then started my path into understanding sex trafficking with minors and the commercial exploitation.
Yeah, because that's not the typical portrait of a person that you imagine that's a victim of that either. So that must have been really eye-opening.
Yes. It was actually very hard for me to understand. So I had to, like you said, I had to go back into the books because there wasn't a lot of awareness out for African Americans, boys, and happening in the family.
Right.
Right.
That was so 2009 started my journey of just realizing I want to be in a place of placements or residential or shelter or somewhere. And then I wanted to turn it into learning more about minors because the negative, the negative scheme of things for adults was still the pimp and hoe narrative.
Right.
And I just couldn't deal with that. But then, we were starting to learn more about the rescuing of minors. And I want to put that in air quotes because I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about that in a minute. But the rescuing was not realistic to me either. I could not see when you rescue a teenager or a child, where do they go?
Yeah.
What does their recovery process look like? Mine took 15 years and I got away. I can't imagine it happening and they don't have a place long term or even temporary.
Wow.
That group home was not okay for that male to be there.
Yeah. What do you see as the biggest misconception about human trafficking that you would like to dismantle?
The rescue. There is the portrait of they're being taken and rescued from their situation. And when I say they, one piece of what I'd like to dismantle is the narrative and the vision of it being what we all think it is: a female, a cisgender female, and a blonde hair, blue eye Caucasian female. There are cases of that, but there's also the international where we're thinking that we do have large organizations here rescuing children from different areas, Thailand and all of those places, but that's their people, that's their culture, that's their situation of what trafficking looks like. When we talk about domestic sex trafficking in the United States, the narrative has to change. And we are not rescuing anyone. I run a shelter in Hawaii and I can't even use the term rescue because I don't do anything but give them space, safety, food, shelter. To them, you ain't rescue me from anything because I'm going to run away in 5 to 10 minutes. because you're not giving me what I need, that my pastor gave me, that my friend gave me, that the drug gave me. You cannot rescue anyone from these things. If their mother is trafficking them, you think you can rescue them from their mother?
Right. And you're right. Some lure that's keeping them there, some benefit that is why they can't walk away from that. And I could see how being too like overbearing and trying to be like, oh, you should do this instead would not be well received. And like the best thing you can do is really offer them support that they can take.
Absolutely. I mean, I am all for one for these huge sting operations.
Yeah.
But we still need the options of placement and residential to help them in their recovery. That is very important, I think, for you all and for your audiences to know, because we did talk about that a lot, right? The recovery aspect of it. I absolutely want people to break down these damn brothels and all these people that have minors there.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of minors that are in these places. They're probably 18, 19, 20, 21 because they were trafficked as a minor, not seen, not heard. They didn't want, they didn't have the resources that they could have, being the placement, being the basic needs being met. This is their boyfriend, this is their older boyfriend, or just the culture that they're in. It's hard to get out, especially if it's familial. But what we do see when we do this sting operations is that we're educating them on the fact that they were trafficked. This is not your boyfriend. This is not someone who's going to, you need to have sex with all these people to have a roof over your head. You don't have to do that. You don't have to give this person money, because they're giving you food. Don't trade sex for a ride to school. You don't need to do that. I know your situation is bad at home and your friend hit you up and said there's a party at this place. Don't go with your friend.
Right.
You don't know what drugs are there, and you don't know if this friend is going to leave you. These are the scenarios that I hear constantly. These are the scenarios of the youth that come through the shelter that were not rescued. So it's a really hard term for me to really associate with in this sex trafficking world, especially when we talk about recovery. Recovery is a great word. We could start using that narrative. We recovered them. We can work on whatever needs are from there.
Right. That's great. And Victoria, the way that I found you and heard your story is through your amazing podcast, which we've already mentioned, but again, it's called Unseen: The Trafficked Truth. And I'm such a huge fan. I fell in love with you right away. I fell in love with your show right away. For any of you all listening, if you like the show I Survived, you have to check out this podcast. Like it's so fantastic. So I'm so glad you're doing it. It's so powerful. What inspired you to start your podcast, and why did a podcast feel like the correct format?
Thank you so much for asking that. There's so many layers to why I did this, but the most important thing to me is that it's not heard. The stories of the survivors that are on this podcast, you wouldn't even know happened to them, because they don't make headlines. They're not even seen in their own community as a survivor. They just look like, oh, you was in this life, you were in this, position. But most of the survivors that I interview are doing the work, right? They're doing the work when they're in their journey of being able to, they're recovered from it. So I am a podcast listener, and I'm a true crime podcast listener. And my goal was, and I was obsessed with I Survived first and foremost, and other true crime podcasts, right? I was obsessed, but then I started to say, okay, well, on my way, I want to still learn, because every day's learning. So I tried to look a podcast that talked about sex trafficking, human trafficking, and they continued with the same educational, psychoeducational narrative of this is what human trafficking is. These are the signs. These are the subject matter experts. I didn't hear from one survivor. I didn't hear from anyone who was in it. It was just allies and advocates, which is fine, but they can't take control, especially when we're talking about it in a true crime way. So I said, well, however people are going to get the attention is maybe they're tired of being educated on it and they're not seeing it enough. They know that now this is the signs of trafficking. This is what I need to look for, but I don't see it. Is it really happening? And who's it happening to? Let me go watch the movie Taken 1, 2, and 3. That's what it is. Oh,
right.
okay. Kidnapped, trafficked. Oh, that's what. So I wanted to have a place where if they knew they were going into a true crime category, that you were going to hear some true ass crime and you were going to hear it from the survivor who was there when she was walking up to the steps being forced as a waitress to go and have sex with men for money and had no options. That's a crime. Did they get their perpetrator or their trafficker or their pimp into jail? No. But their story matters. And I also wanted to be a person of color and a person who can associate it with and create that space in a okay, I'm not trying to dominate this field, but I want to be present in it. And there weren't a lot of podcasts like that specifically told stories of sex trafficking. I'm associating myself with I Survived, and that was one of my very, very important podcasts because of the survivor stories being first.
Yeah.
And it's scary as shit. Sometimes you need to scare people the hell
For sure.
to reality. That's why I'm obsessed with true crime. You
Mhm.
know, I want to know how to get the hell away. Victoria, thank you
Yes.
for telling me how to get away in that situation.
Yeah, when the victims themselves often aren't aware of what's going on. I mean, there definitely needs to be more awareness and more perspectives from people that lived it so we can hear what the real story is, for sure. That's You work now as the program coordinator at the Commercial Sexual Exploitation of Children and Sex Trafficking Shelter for Minors in Hawaii. First of all, could you be more amazing? And
I don't think so.
No. And second of all, tell us about the mission at the shelter.
You know, I was at the shelter. So, okay, backtrack because you guys are going to love me even more. My partner and I, she's in the military, and we were stationed in Italy. And I said, you know, when we go back to the States, I really want to find a place that I can do the work. I think it's my time. I'm 15 years later, I think it's my time. And if I can use my survivor and my advocacy work and be a representative for this organization or this platform, I want to find that place. I did diligently looked upon trainings for myself. I looked upon, like, I just did my work. And I made it a point because I didn't feel like there were enough organizations even having survivors at the table.
Right.
We weren't even in their leadership team. They weren't driving the organization. So I seriously wanted Hawaii because I said the 50th state, it was the last state to literally, I don't know the exact legislative term, but the last state to stop arresting minors for prostitution.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as a child prostitute.
No.
That's awful.
And there are youth who are arrested in prison because of that.
Wow.
So I did my work and I went to this organization that I have that I'm working with now. And I applied for more boots on the ground. I said, I want to be in the streets. That's how I started. I want to be there. And different circumstances arose and they said, you know what? You would actually be good for this shelter that we're about to open. I almost burst into tears that day. That was in 2017. I couldn't believe it. So what we are seeing is that there are sex trafficking crimes where, like, we intercepted a male coming from the airport that looked very suspicious with a young Asian girl. Stuff in their luggage just didn't make sense. She had passport stamps all across the freaking continents. It was crazy. Then we also get the youth that are exploited through social media. Hey girl, you look good. You want some weed? Hey girl, hey mister, hey boy, you're sexy, whatever. And they're constantly getting exploited for just basic stuff. Or they're in the foster care system, and they're like, they don't like to be in their foster home. They want to go back to their mom who essentially trafficked them. And this place is really what I could have dreamed for. They're going to run away. They're going to have attitude because they have serious trauma.
Yeah.
We are not a long-term residential where we're offering them treatment. You got to do this, you got to do that. We're not enforcing our plans upon them. We're not looking at what successes are for them. We are giving them just the space to really meet their basic needs. And I look forward to going to work every day and then leaving work to go to the beach because everybody's like, what? How is this happening? Why? It happens.
Right.
And we can also, have a good day, take the youth to the beach, and enjoy some of the great things that Hawaii has to offer.
They deserve just a nice easy time once in a while too,
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
Oh, wow.
They do.
Yeah.
And what a great place to get some self-care in.
Yeah.
Like Hawaii is just built
in Hawaii.
Yeah. Number one, self-care. Thank you. Just by walking and grounding yourself in the sun.
Yeah.
Right.
Toes in the sand. I'm sorry. Feeling the breeze, looking at the palm tree.
Nothing better than that.
Sorry. All of these things are our realities. And it's just like we really don't pay homage to it, and we really should. I mean, I'm not born and raised here,
Right.
but I mean, goodness gracious. If I could have a balance, this would be it. I know there's but then there's also the recovery.
Yeah.
Right.
Sounds like you really fell into the perfect place for you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, what can we all do to help better educate ourselves about what sex trafficking really is and what it looks like? And how can we help?
Obviously listen to my podcast, but no.
Yeah.
That's one.
Right, exactly. FYI, find survivor stories, find survivor-led, driven events, organizations, grassroots or major, and listen to podcasts that offer you some of that awareness. But at the end of the day, it's really, don't take up the space where you're trying to do something that's over your capacity. Can you just start small with really understanding the reality of it? And that to me is being aware by hearing a true survivor story. Because they'll tell you really what it is, and then they'll tell you what you can do. We have hotlines, we have the human trafficking hotline. You call, you see something, you call. But how often do you really know what you're looking at? If you don't, you know what I mean? The true reality is that these cases and these crimes are happening around you. So the first thing is to know.
Right.
That's such a good point. Yeah, you can't just give a shallow tip, but you've got to really hear it from survivors.
Yes, because I could have gave you one, right? I could have said, ladies, audiences, men, gents, everyone, call the hotline if you see something, but please know what you're looking for and what you're looking at. It could look like domestic violence. It could look like kidnapping. It could look like child abuse and neglect. Call.
All right.
Just call. It's suspicion never hurt anybody.
Right.
Better safe than sorry.
Better safe than sorry.
Yeah.
Can you let our viewers and listeners know where they can find you on social media?
Yes, absolutely. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I run the Instagram account. So if you are definitely looking, which we've had anonymous survivors come forward and just say that they're really empowered by the stories. And just know it does come directly to me. We are a small team of 3, and the other 2 are students. One's a recent graduate. So it's a very safe space. It's Unseen TTT Pod at Twitter, and it's Unseen TTT Podcast at Instagram and Facebook.
Well, Victoria, thank you so much for being with us today, taking time with us today, and thank you for everything you do. And everyone out there, of course, be sure to subscribe to Unseen, the Trafficked Truth, wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks so much for tuning into This Week in True Crime with Murder News. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button below, give us a thumbs up, and tell all of your true crime friends.
Help support Murder News by signing up for our commune at murdermurder.news, and your $5 a month sponsorship helps us keep the true crime lights on. It helps us produce our weekly show and help support our amazing writers that keep you up to date with the latest breaking news every day on murdermurder.news. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. See you next week.